Didn't see you there. I was a little bit distracted by playing with Delay 1, which is the topic of our live stream for tonight. It's our latest module. It's a BBD, and we're really excited to show it to you. So we've shown Delay 1 before, of course, but today is a little bit special because it's finally releasing. And what you're hearing right now is a pair of Delay 1s making all the sound. So we've got a carpless strong melody line, and I'll explain later in the stream what carpless strong means. And we have a kick drum, or bass drum, or however you want to call it. Completely synthesized by this leftmost Delay 1. I love that sound. So what is Delay 1 all about? Well, it's our take on making a delay module, as the name implies. And for the people who know Joranalogue audio design, my name is Joran, by the way. I design modules. The point of the brand is to design modules that are analog through and through. And that's often a challenge to see how we can get the most out of pure analog technology, how we can really push the boundary of things. And with Delay 1, the challenge is, of course, that if you want to make an analog delay, you need a way to store a signal and then retrieve it a little bit later. And in digital, that's very easy. You put it in a little memory chip, you wait a little bit, you read it out. In analog, you need to use either tape or you use something called a BBD, a bucket brigade device. And it's a kind of chip that's it's really 70s technology. It's ancient. And people have gotten used to BBDs sounding pretty terrible, to be honest. So they're noisy, they have distortion. My goal with Delay 1 was to make a BBD that sounds really pristine. A modern take on a BBD module. And of course it has voltage control over everything, as people have gotten used to from the brand. And I think I can safely say that we've succeeded in the goal. And there's a couple of innovations that made this possible. And I'll go a little bit more into the technical details later in the stream for those who are interested, and they are interesting topics. We're also going to talk a little bit about the module itself, what's the overview, you know, what are the different parts of the module. We're gonna have an amazing musical moment by our very own Frits. Amazing musician, great team member, so definitely stick around for that one. We are going to, and that's maybe the most fun one, we are going to give away one of these modules. And what we're going to do is we will have the synthesizer decide who will win their very own Delay 1. And we'll do that towards the end of the stream. But right now we're going to see who is going to enter in the contest. And we're going to use the chat for this. So the chat is on, all right. And what I'm going to ask everyone who wants to win a Delay 1, which I'm not sure why you wouldn't, but you know, it's a free world. I'm going to ask everyone to write in the comments, I want a Delay 1. That's it. I want a Delay 1. And try to not have too many spelling mistakes. That's really going to make our life easier. And I will just jam a little bit right now for a minute, 2. And by the end of the jam, we will know who wants to win a Delay 1. So let's go. All right. Do we know who wants a Delay 1? I think a few people want a Delay 1. That's nice to hear. So how did Delay 1 come about? Well, we've been making modules since 2016, and you know, the people who know the brand, they will probably know Filter 8, our take on making a multimode filter, Generate 3, our take on making an oscillator. Well, a little bit more, we call it a multiphonic signal generator. We've got Contour 1, we've got Morph 4. We've got quite a few modules that try and push the envelope of analog technology of analog design. And Delay 1 very much fits into that. It was one of the most challenging modules to design because of the technology. So on filter, or for an oscillator, for a slew limiter, you can do a lot using VCAs, voltage controlled amplifiers. But if you want to delay a signal, you really need a chip that can do this. And that's where the bucket brigade device comes in, which is, it was originally developed by Philips, then it was made by Panasonic later. And you found these in a lot of quite crappy echo effects in the 70s, some very nice ones as well. And then digital, around the 80s, digital technology started to take over. And digital delays are purely objectively speaking better because they keep the signal fidelity better. But there's something about BBDs that's actually quite nice. Like they introduce distortion, but in a pleasing way. And especially when you start adding feedback, things become really nice, as you just heard. So we've got an ancient technology that's making a bit of a comeback, like analog synthesizers in general. But we didn't want to just make another delay module, another BBD module with you know, this crappy, noisy signal degradation. So instead, we looked at how can we actually get the best performance out of BBD? What can we change about the way BBDs have been driven since the 70s? Can we do something different? Can we do something better? Can we make these, can we bring the BBD technology into the 21st century, essentially? And we found that yeah, it was actually possible. So how does a BBD actually work? It's quite fascinating. The name comes from the principle of operation, or better, an analogy. So imagine there's a fire and you need to put out this fire, but you don't have any hoses, but you have a bunch of people with buckets. So it turns out that the most efficient way to put out a fire is to put all the people in a row and then hand buckets of water one to the other. Instead, everyone would just be running around and it would be chaos and everyone would be killed in the fire, which is sad. So we've got a similar thing going on, but for analog signals. You put a signal on a capacitor, which is like a bucket for electricity. And then after a little while, you let the signal pass to the next bucket. You wait a little bit again. You let it pass to the next bucket. Imagine if you have thousands of these buckets and you pass the signal quite quickly between them, you can actually delay a signal at quite good fidelity using just analog technology. And that's exactly what's inside a BBD. And the trick here is that the delay line, or the delay time rather, depends on how quickly you drive this, because the amount of buckets stays the same. So the only thing you can change is how quickly the signal passes from one bucket to another. And that's using something called a clock. And a clock, we think of a clock in a modular system as, you know, this tempo signal, 1, 2, 3, 4. These are faster clocks. Ideally, you don't want the clock to go below 20 kilohertz, or even better, above 40 kilohertz. So you can pass signal frequencies up to 20 kilohertz. And we have somebody called Nyquist to thank for the theory about this. And then the maximum clock time really depends on the BBD technology, and generally we are talking hundreds of kilohertz. On delay 1, we've managed to push the BBD chip in there to 1 megahertz. So we are basically overclocking the poor thing, but in a way that actually sounds quite nice. And this way we can get delay times down to 1 millisecond with a maximum of 50 milliseconds by having this wide clock range. And that was one of the key principles. Now, I think it's interesting to talk about how Delay 1 actually came about. Why did we decide to make this BBD module? And it's, of course, we, and not just me, but the whole team, we're always thinking about new module ideas, new things to do. BBD, or rather Delay 1, actually came from Enhance 2, which is, and we can show it to you, it's this module right here. It's a stereophonic enhancer. So Enhance 2 allows you to change the balance of a stereo path, the width. We have side and mid tilt filters. And in one of the earliest concepts for that module, there was also a stereo widening mode. And that's, while developing this, I found that actually the stereo widening was quite interesting on its own because it had a BBD chip. And also BBD needs quite a lot of support circuitry. You need to have filters, you need to have this clock signal to control it. So I decided it would be better for this BBD to have its own module. And that became Delay 1. And then there was no limit, really. How fast can we give, you know, how wide can we make this clock range? What kind of filtering can we do? Can we make it 1 volt per octave tunable with temperature compensation? The answer is yes, we can, of course. Can we give it split phase outputs? Can we give it clock inputs and outputs for high frequency signals? Can we make everything voltage controlled? Absolutely. And that became Delay 1, which is the module we are presenting today. It's 12 HP. We have 2 of them here. And it's, as I said, it's voltage controlled everything, BBD. So I want to show you a little bit about how modules are born. And what we have here is a breadboard, and it's actually got 2 future modules on here, Delay 1 and Orbit 3, because it turned out to be that we only needed half of it for Delay 1, so the other half became Orbit 3. And this is how I, as an electronics designer, like to prototype circuits. This is really where a design, after first simulations, after first concepting, after first schematics, this is where it's born for the first time. This is where the actual circuit exists for the first time and where I can hear it for the first time. So we have an early version of Delay 1 on this breadboard. That was loud. And this is the second iteration. So this is an actual module. What happens is when it sounds good on the breadboard, we go to an actual module. You can put into a system, you can hear, but the circuit is often subject to change. And let's see, can we see that from the top? Yes, we can. Here, there's been a few changes done to the circuits, and this is a revision of, I don't know, Oh, it's a September 2021, so it's almost 2 years old, this one. There's a lot of tweaking before we are really happy with how a module sounds, before we really feel like it's ready to go into the world. There's a lot of tweaking to be done. And when all that tweaking is done and we're ready to produce it, we see the final form right here. So that was a little insight. I hope you'll find that interesting into how modules come about. And right now, I'll give the word to, I'll give the system first to Frits and then the words, who is going to give you a much more interesting and musically pleasing demo than I could ever be able to. So give a round of applause. We can't hear you, but we're going to pretend like we can hear you. Please give a round of applause to Frits Jacobs, our resident patching expert and master of all things voltage controlled. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think I will start. So what the magical thing about delay 1 is that it also tracks 1 volt per octave really nicely, and in my opinion it's sometimes a bit hard to show it in our system, but now I'm gonna use a MIDI to CV keyboard to just patch the delay and play it a bit so you can hear how nicely it tracks. So we're gonna take the gate, put it in the plug, take a CV signal, put it in the 1 volt per octave, open the feedback pretty wide, and patch one of the outputs through morph, and this one goes to the transmit. Now let's hear. I don't right. Yeah. Mm. Wait a second. Gate. Ah, no. Uh, fuck. Uh, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Is er geen geluid voor een reden? Yeah, sometimes it's always a bit thinking with modular. So now I patched it to the plug input and the CV out of the MIDI keyboard to the Volt per octave. And now you can hear how nicely it tracks with some dampening maybe. Oh. Now let's make a small sequence. Now you can hear how nicely it tracks, and you can play some really wonderful melodies with it. But now maybe I will try to make it a bit more crazier by taking the 1 volt per octave and melting it to a generate. 1 volt per octave input. I will also melt the gate signal. And now we're gonna send generate through the delay, and let's see how that sounds. I'm gonna decrease the feedback. I'm gonna remove the plug for a second. Very nice. You really get a thick oscillator sound from this. Let's remove the volt per octave of delay. Oh, I really like this. Let's patch it back in the volt per octave of the delay. Maybe patch plug 2. Nice. I'm gonna take the gate output, use a contour. Let's take another contour. I'm gonna bypass the go through the filter with the end result. And now another contour to open up the filter a bit to make a really And now we're gonna take this output and put it through another delay for some chorus flanger sounds. I close the feedback. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I'm gonna use orbit in a pretty low frequency to modulate the time. Very nice. And now make a quick kick to put some context in this patch. To make the kick, I will clock the step 8 with the same tempo as the sequence. I will take two individual steps of the step and add them with our add module, add 2, and this one I'm gonna use to trigger the kick drum. I'm gonna take a generate for this. I will modulate the exponential FM from generate, and let's see what I was doing here. So I'm gonna do this for a second. I'm gonna use this one. You're doing nothing. Here we have the kick drum. I wish I had some control over the VCA of generate, but yeah. Maybe use the core out of generate to modulate the frequency of the delay. Everything at audio rate, of course. Really sounds so nice. And that's it for my patch. So yeah, the thing that I wanted to show with this patch is that you can really make really thick synth sounds with just one oscillator and a little bit of patching, and it can make every patch better, I guess, or delay. Okay.
Hello again. So, how did you like that demonstration by Frits? Can you tell us in the chat, please? Because we have no idea if you liked it or not. So we'd love to know. So you've heard a bit of Delay 1. You've learned a bit about BBDs, or not, maybe you already knew. You've heard Frits make music with it. Let's take a deeper look together and how the module actually works. Ooh, that's a lot of cables. Frits likes to use a lot of cables. So we have a little block diagram we'd like to show you about how we made Delay 1. And it's, let's take a look. So what you'll see on the diagram is that you have an input going into the delay line, and that's the actual BBD chip with all the things it needs to work and the high frequency clock generating VCO. That's all in there. And then we have a feedback path. What that does is it sends the delayed signal back into the delay line. So it goes round and round and round and makes the most amazing sounds. And that's how you get these resonances, because at certain frequencies, the delay time corresponds with the peaks in the signal. So it amplifies these frequencies, and at other peaks you get cancellation. It's a lot like standing waves in acoustics, which are also caused by the size of a room and the time it takes for sound to travel. And in that feedback path we have a filter. We call that filter damping because it's a damping filter. But it's really just a simple -6 dB per octave low pass filter or a high pass filter, and that's really cool. So you actually get these high pass sounds as well, which I'll demonstrate in a moment. There's a built-in plug generator you might have noticed on the input, and that's a signal that makes it easy to do car+strong synthesis, which is this technique where you put a little noise burst into a delay line and you get an amazing string type sound out, which you've heard a little bit of before. And then at the end we have something we call a split phase blend circuit, which is really just a dry wet control, of course also voltage controlled, because everything in delay 1 is voltage controlled. This one is nice because you get two different dry wet mixes. One with the positive wet signal as normal, and the other one we call that the negative output that has the wet inverted, but the dry signal stays in phase. So you actually get, if you use a module as a comb filter, for example, you get inverted frequency responses. The frequencies on one of these outputs being amplified are being attenuated in the other one, and the other way around. So it's actually quite useful to have both of them. And that's it. That's how the module is built up. Of course, this is a huge simplification. There's, I believe, around 400 components in there. But we like to break things down as much as we can into simple terms for musicians to make music. So let's take a closer look at the front panel of the module. We have 9 knobs, 2 switches, 12 sockets, some LEDs, some trim pots. And the first thing you may have noticed is that there's no real knob to change the length of the delay time. Well, there is. So we've decided to have 2 knobs, one coarse and one fine, to set the delay time. And this is the same principle as in Generate 3 and Filter 8, where you have one big knob to sweep the delay time and the second one to fine-tune. So it's exactly like you would find on an oscillator. And it's actually very, very useful to be able to fine-tune the delay time. We've also decided that shorter delay times will be on the right and the longer on the left. Because if you use this as a synth voice, this module as a car plus strong, and I shall demonstrate. It makes a lot of sense. Ooh, that's quite short. Let's make it a bit longer. Ooh, something is happening. Did you hear that? Let's change the range a bit. I'm tired of pushing the button all the time. Let's do something about that. And now you'll see that as I turn up the coarse knob, frequency goes up and down just like on an oscillator. This sound is simply the built-in noise generator of Delay 1. And that's controlled using the plug input. So we have a main signal input for your delay type sounds. And then we have the dedicated plug inputs. And if you put a trigger in there, it's going to create this little noise burst. You put that through the delay line, you add some feedback, and you get something called car plus strong sounds, which is based on an old paper by 2 people. One was called car plus, the other strong. And they found this new way to do synthesis, not just subtractive or additive, but by putting a bit of noise through a delay time at a delay line, add some feedback, you get something that's quite close to guitar sounds. And as I change the dry-wet blend, you can hear simply the dry, the noise signal, or the wet signal with the feedback. If I put halfway, you can simply hear the noise signal itself plus its delayed copy. Let's add feedback. And to be clear, there's no oscillator involved here. It's simply delay 1 itself using its built-in plug generator, receiving triggers from step 8, synthesizing all the sound here. Now, if we change the damping, we're modulating the filter frequency in the feedback path. And it has quite a pronounced effect on the timbre, because as we attenuate higher frequencies through every iteration of the feedback loop, we start to audibly attenuate them during the whole duration of the sound, during the decay time of the sound. So it's a lot like putting a envelope modulated filter like you would do in subtractive synthesis. But in this case, the filter frequency actually stays fixed, and it's just the fact that the same signal goes through it again and again and again, that you get this effects of the sound dying out, essentially. Much like it happens in nature. That's why it sounds nice. We also have negative feedback. In this case, the polarity of the feedback signal is inverted before it's applied to the input of the delay line again. And it turns out that it has, in many cases, this nice octave shifting effect. Now the damping filter, to return to that one, it's not just low pass, and this is another unique feature about delay 1. It also has a high pass mode. And you can get some interesting banjo-like sounds out of it. So, if you've been thinking about making that modular country and western album, I think now is the time. The world is ready. Now, so far we've just been using delay 1 as a voice, but I'd also like to let you hear it processing a sound. Let's start with something simple. Well, not so simple. It's the full output of Generate 3, which is creating a complex harmonic signal. If we set the dry-wet halfway, we get comb filtering. And you can hear even at long delay times you get some almost spring reverby type sounds. At short delay times, fully wet. Lots of feedback, a little bit of high pass. Listen to that. And one of the goals we had with Delay 1 is to make people forget they are listening to a BBD, and at certain times Delay 1 really makes you think like you're listening to some digital DSP effects, but always in a nice way, always in a pleasing. And of course we also have voltage control over all of these parameters. So we have voltage controlled dry wet blending, we have time modulation, we have feedback, and all of these parameters have their own dedicated polarized modulation knob. Let's try something else. We have something called a high frequency input. And what this does is it bypasses the internal high frequency VCO that's inside Delay 1, and it allows you to put in any other signal. For example, filter 8. What's happening now is that the coarse and fine knobs no longer have effect. So we've bypassed the internal high frequency VCO, which by default can never go below 20 kilohertz. And we can put in any external signal we'd like and use that as a clock instead. Why would you do this? Well, because it makes these sounds. So this is how you're able to achieve delay times longer than the standard 50 milliseconds. If you're okay with hearing this clock signal, which is now kilohertz instead of tens of kilohertz, if you're okay with getting the aliasing and the signal degradation and the noise, you can achieve very long delay times and modulate them simply by using any oscillator you may have. The higher it can go in frequency, the better, because then you can do things like this. So we've tried with Delay 1 to give you all of the options, and even when we take away the option of getting long delay times with low fidelity, we still give them back to you in the way of this high frequency input. There's even a high frequency output right next to it, which allows you to clock a second Delay 1. So you can create a stereo pair, for example. Or if you have a frequency divider that can work at high frequencies up to 1 megahertz, you can actually divide it and then get delay time ratios. So one can be twice the length of the other. And you could build a system with just delay ones in effect if you are crazy enough, and I'm afraid there are people crazy enough for this. If you do, let us know, and we want to hear it. So that's an overview of all the features of Delay 1. I hope you've enjoyed this. I'm really curious about the questions some of you may have about this module. And I believe we do have some questions already. have a quick look. Someone asked here, I don't know who, unfortunately, how many stages are installed in the BBD chip. It's a 2048 stage BBD, but we don't like to tell this because people will expect longer delay times than the module gives by default, because actually every other BBD design on the market uses lower clock frequencies to get longer delay times. We focused about getting fast clock frequencies for short delay times, up down to 1 millisecond, but still a wide range. 1 to 50 is around 5 octaves of modulation range. But to answer your question, yeah, it's a 2048 in there, which turned out to give us the best balance of features and performance we wanted. Someone asks that's a nice one. Is a BBD digital? It really depends on your definition of digital. It's time discrete. So you take your signal and you slice it up in the time domain, but the voltages are still analog. So there's no quantization happening in the voltage domain. So BBDs are analog, but they do exhibit some of the effects like aliasing and things you might find in digital designs. So they are kind of stuck in between, but not really, because the signal is still analog, because it's never being represented by digital bits, but it does have some of the properties of DSP, of digital signal processing. That's not really an answer, I know, but there's people having debates about this, and we prefer to make cool sounds rather than have debates. How long can the delay actually become? Asked by Chai Baba. Chai Baba, interesting name. Well, I think we've just answered that question. It's not using negative time modulation, because again the lower bounds is 20 kilohertz of the high frequency clock generator built into the module, and that's to make sure that if you modulate it, you can never go into this region where you would get a lot of aliasing and clock whine and so on. So it's only through the high frequency input that you can actually achieve these delay times, and there is no upper limit. The only upper limit is how much signal degradation you can bear, or your audience, or neighbors. But in theory, the signal dissipates into oblivion as you approach longer and longer delay times. That sounds very profound, actually. I was not planning on it sounding that. If patch any square wave more than 50%, someone asked if it matters the pulse width we put into the plug inputs. No, it does not. It's designed to be rising edge controlled, so it's purely trigger driven, the plug input, which actually makes it a lot easier in a lot of patches. So we like to do that. We've also done that on filter 8 on the ping inputs. Because otherwise you might have different trigger sources ending up sounding different, and it's quite annoying. Are there any more analog effects in the pipeline? That's well, that's an answer that will answer itself for those who are patient and for those who are willing to suffer some delays. And I think, I just saw a new one coming in. Can I talk about the reversed outputs? Yeah, it's one thing, like I mentioned, is the comb filtering, where you can get these complementary outputs, and I can demonstrate this quickly. So now we have a comb filter patch. Delay 1 is clocking itself again. We have no feedback. We have short delay times. And as I sweep the delay time, you can hear the comb filtering effect. Now if I change the output, you get a different timbre. And actually I could switch between them using switch 4 to let you hear that a little bit clearer. Oh, by the way, these are new patch cables that are coming soon. I think you may like them. By the end of the year, we hope you'll be able to get them. They're really fun to patch with. Let's add some feedback. So we get two different comb filtering timbres out of here. You could do it for some like fake stereo mixing, but it's actually more interesting to delay one ear, for example, at high frequencies and create delay or create stereo effects that way. Because the if you use these as a complementary pair, then the delayed signal will be fully in the side channels, which you may actually want if you're looking for some crazy psychoacoustic stuff. So that's two applications for the inverted output. Andolini, the flying tortellini. How do you make up these names? I don't understand. Is there any internal high pass filtering for clock noise? I think that's probably low pass filtering. And the reason is the answer rather is no. We've kept a full 20 kilohertz bandwidth throughout the entire signal chain to get the highest possible fidelity, which is also why we limit by default the lowest clock frequency to 20 kilohertz, so you're never gonna hear it. You're getting a little bit of aliasing, of course, at those frequencies, but you're never actually hearing the clock. So we don't need low pass filtering. It's really nice. What do the numbers represent in your module names? I've always wondered, delay 1. I think that's if you take more than a little moment to think about each module and how it works and what it does, I think you'll figure it out. Are there AA filters in front of anti-aliasing? Yes, we put anti-aliasing. So we make sure there's no frequencies above 20 kilohertz that hit the BBD, because they would cause more aliasing. So they get down converted essentially through the Nyquist mechanism to audible frequencies. So we make sure they're out of there, and they're really steep. And of course, there's the restoration filter as well after BBD. That's internal stuff that as a user you don't realize. It's just things we do as electronics engineers to make sure they sound good. And heckle, I see. What surprised you the most once you had the Delay One finished? Not really when it was finished, but when it was working for the first time on the breadboard. I was really quite surprised by, even in that early stage, by the sounds you could get from a delay line, and especially when feedback was added, which I remember putting that resistor in there that made like the first, not adjustable, just a resistor to add the feedback loop, and suddenly you got all these resonances and echoes and spring verby type sounds, and that was really a pivotal moment in the development of Delay One, hearing these sonic possibilities of BBD. All right, I think it's time to start wrapping up the stream. But first we need to find out who has won Delay 1. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the stream, I'm going to let the synthesizer decide. Oh, and by the way, thank you for the questions. It's always very interesting to get an outside perspective on what on our work we do, the modules we design. And we like to answer questions. We'll probably stay in the stream a little bit longer to answer additional questions, and otherwise there's plenty of channels to reach us. But I will patch something that we call the Joranalogue slot machine. And it works a little bit like this. What we do is we take orbit 3, which is a chaotic oscillator. So it's gonna do its own thing. We don't know. It has a life on its own. It's orbit 3 is a little bit like the Eurorack equivalent of a cat. It's there, it does its thing. You don't get to influence it, but you actually get quite a lot of parameters on orbit 3, but it still does its own thing in the end. So you'll see every time I push the button, orbit 3 goes fast and then slow, and it's going to reach a certain point. And I'm going to patch that through select 2 as well, just to make sure it's not going to, because it's an analog circuit, of course, it may suddenly go to a different point slowly, but it can get there. So we're gonna make sure it does not. Let's use this one instead, because there is a normalization here. And now we shall make some sounds, which is going to be a lot more fun than just looking at the lights. Ooh, that's quite high. How does that sound? I think pretty good, but we need a delay. Yeah, we do. I think we have it. So how is this going to work? Well, first we need to know how many people are watching the stream right now. I think we need 3 goes at this to do it right. Okay, so earlier in the stream I asked everyone who wants to win a delay 1 to put in the comments I want a delay 1. If you didn't watch from the beginning of the stream, unfortunately you're not in the contest. So that's quite important that you didn't forget to do that in the beginning. We've recorded all of your entries. Double ones are not counted. And we've given everyone a number. And what we shall do now is let the synthesizer decide which number has won delay 1. And after the stream, we will contact you and make sure we get your details so we know where to send it. Now we're gonna do this 3 times, and every time the step 8 will land at one of the stages. And we can see that on the LEDs, which one it lands on. Once it stops, I will hold the value with the switch just to make sure no cosmic rays can change the outcome. Then we'll do a little bit of calculation to determine a number, and then we'll see who has won a delay 1. Now it could be that this number ends up being higher than the actual number of viewers, then we'll just do it again. No worries. So, are we ready for the first go? I forgot to turn off the switch. Okay, that looks to me like a 3. So the first number is 3. Now we'll do a little bit of mathematics after we've done the 3 throws, but I will show you how it works. Second time. That looks like a 5. And the third time. Here we go. There we go. That's a 6. Now 3, 5, 6. This is not a binary result. So we need to do a little bit of mathematics. First we had 3. We're going to use 2. We need to subtract 1, so we count from 0 to make sure everyone is part of the contest. We have a 2 times 64. That's going to be too high, I think. And then we have a 5 minus 1 is 4 times 8. And then the last one is a 6. So the winner has number 166. Do we have 166? We have to do it again. Now I propose, if everyone at home agrees, and we don't have a quick way to check that, so I'm just going to assume that everyone agrees, that everyone, or any, for the first row, every value below the second half is below 64, and the right half is above. And we don't have 128 viewers, as I understand it. So that's going to work. So we're going to do it again. There we go. Okay, so it's over 64. Let's get the second one. That's a 6. And the last number? That's another 6. So we have 64, because the first result was on the right half, plus 5, because we need to subtract 1. 5 times 8. No, we did one too many. We shall do it one more time. And this is the final one. So we only need 2 and 64. No, we did not. You know, it's interesting because this is about the powers of 2. And what happens is, if we had only 64 viewers or less, it was very easy. And above it, suddenly the maximum number becomes much higher. I see mathematics are hard. We shall be back to you momentarily. Just a little moment. All right, we're back again. So it turns out that a modular synthesizer is not the best way to generate a random winner in a giveaway. That's not gonna stop us from using it anyway. We found that the system we used before was exact, but the result was a little bit too high for the amount of contestants we actually have. Just a little bit. So we're gonna do it one more time and then we should have a result. So first one is going to determine whether we are below or above 64 again. That's a 6. Let's do it again. So we are above 64. That's a 5. And now one more go. Looks like we land on a 6 again. So what happens if we take these numbers? We have 64 to start with, because we were in the second half on the first go. We take 5, which was our second result. We subtract 1. We do that times 8. And then the last number, the last result, determines our final number we need to add. And that was a 6, so we subtract 1, becomes a 5. So 64 plus 4 times 8 plus 5. And our result is 101. And now I hope we have 101 or more entries. And it turns out we don't. So one more go. Oh, there's another option, is that we divide it by 2 and then round up, which is going to give us a number. And I think at this point that's the fairest thing to do. So we have 101. We divide it by 2. It's going to give us a number. We will round that up. And that's the result. And that's final. We've done our hardest best to use the synthesizer to determine the winner. So if you want to blame anyone, if you're not happy with the results, it's the synthesizer and not us. All right, here we go. That's 50 and a half. We round that up. We get 51 is the winner of our free delay 1. So, do we have a name? I think a name is appearing. And we have a second synthesizer which has stored all of the names in enormous analog memories, crunching the numbers as we speak. It's too big to fit in the frame. That's why we can't show it. And I see a name has come out. Matthew Salivani. Congratulations. We will get in touch with you. You've won Delay 1. Enjoy. And with that hilarious and slightly going different than planned giveaway, it's time to end the stream. Thank you very much for spending the last 1.5 hour with us, learning everything about Delay One, about how it sounds, what it can do. If you didn't win a Delay One, you can order yours right now. Well, after the stream is done. From any of our dealers, we have a substantial network of amazing Eurorack dealers worldwide. And if you go to our website, you can click the little link dealers on top, and you'll see the full list. It's over 40 shops worldwide that have Delay One in stock on the 8th of August on release date, or very soon, shortly after. Feel free to contact your favorite shop if they don't offer pre-orders yet, to make sure you have yours as quickly as possible. And again, thank you so much for spending a Sunday evening or morning or night, wherever it is where you are, listening to crazy BBD sounds with us. From here in Belgium, we thank you very much again for your time, for your patience, and we hope to hear you soon again. Bye bye.